Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Comic Book Wednesday. This is an epic comic book collaboration between Michael K. Vaughan and myself that began on Michael's channel when he decided to look at Marvel's epic collections, their paperback full-color reprint line that have some really intriguing stuff in there. They are an absolute boon to anybody who wants to read up on Marvel's enormous backlog. But can't afford original issues and wants sort of high quality, wants to be able to see what the color was instead of black and white reprint volumes, but also can't afford the hardcover Marvel Masterwork series that are plodding along and have been for 10 years. The Epic Collection is great, and I decided to horn my way in, and in penance for that, I let Michael pick what we're doing from week to week, which has led to some disagreements and also some glorious things like the one we're looking at today. And we decided fairly early on to range far away from Marvel Comics, from Marvel's epic collections, to just anything that we want to talk about. And the one that Michael picked today, he picked a broad subject, Superman in the 1950s. But he also held up a specific volume. There are many volumes that you could get, although as he's entirely right. I'll leave a link to his video. He's entirely right to complain that there aren't enough volumes. It's incredible how poor DC is at conserving their own reprint culture. They have nothing like Marvel's epic collection, or anything really approaching it. They've made strides in the last 10 years, but oh my, there's a lot more work to be done. The volume that Michael held up was this one, Superman in the 50s. This came out, I think this year, 2020. This came out in 2020, and it is a terrific anthology. They went to the bother of getting an original cover art. That's great. And a lot of care went into picking what's in here to show you the transition that Superman went through. When for the longest time he had just completely static adventures. And for the longest time that was perfectly fine. That is perfectly fine. So a gang in Metropolis comes up with a clever idea. They foist it on Metropolis, and Superman has to figure out what the idea is in order to stop it. It's not a question of brute force. There isn't any brute force in the world. There's only Superman. But they have to figure out, and he has to figure it out. He has to use his brain to figure out the complex problem involved somehow, or the gimmick involved somehow. Once he figures it out, the solution to the problem is a foregone conclusion. There isn't anyone who can stand against Superman unless they have kryptonite. They can't stand against him. And for a blissful period, for years and years and years, that made one great Superman story after another. That's all you wanted. Superman figures it out, saves the day. That's all you wanted. And then the zeitgeist started to change, and it was helped to change by Stan Lee, who decided there should be dramatic stakes involved in superhero adventures. Have you ever heard of anything so ridiculous in your life as dramatic stakes in a superhero adventure? Utterly ridiculous. Now, the stories in here predate Stan Lee by a bit, but the zeitgeist, he crystallized it and made it de rigueur. Now there's no way around it. Now there's no way not to do it. Now that if you introduce a character's girlfriend, she's going to end up diced into little pieces and served in hamburger meat by the Joker to an elementary school, and he'll treat it with strychnine, so they all foam at the mouth and die. It's just on and on and on. Or you'll have Superman swoop down low over Metropolis, and he will notice that the latest supervillain is collecting eyeballs, and people are wandering around with bloody sockets, and you'll see the bloody sockets. And when he uncovers stops the villain finally and rips the villain's mask off, it's Jimmy Olsen or Pa Kent. Only Pa Kent has cancer. It's an external cancer, so it disfigures him the more it kills him. It's all become just this horrible psycho melodrama that occasionally yields a good story. We've seen plenty of them on Comic Book Wednesday, but usually it doesn't. Usually it's a bad idea. And this, unfortunately, is the period where Superman is transitioning away from static storytelling, static, wonderful, wonderful storytelling, to stories where things happen and things matter. They don't quite happen in this volume. This volume is instead a fantastic collection of great adventures. uh, that including the introduction of Supergirl. These are the tremors that are starting to rock Superman's world. Is that suddenly he's not the only survivor of the planet Krypton. Suddenly there's um, Kandor, a whole city of Kryptonians that were shrunk down to miniature size by Brainiac. But that it's a whole city. Imagine that for years and years and years you think you're the only person, the only American left alive, and then you realize that in a closet in the Smithsonian is a miniature version of New York City with millions of people in it. But also Supergirl, another Kryptonian whose rocket ship lands on Earth near Superman, so that he can investigate right away, and who is his cousin. She is his cousin. That doesn't stop her for a long time from having romantic feelings towards him in an ongoing narrative gimmick that has been brushed under the carpet. No doubt it has been brushed under the carpet. But even so, it's not just any Kryptonian that pops out of that rocket ship. It's his cousin. But that's not the only thing. A lot of the comics in this anthology mimic the adventures of Superboy over in Adventure Comics, which sold really well. A big, fat $150 hardcover omnibus of Adventure Comics would have at least 2 buyers. Michael K. Vaughan would get it because he's quite mad and gets $150 anthologies of everything. But also I would do it. I mock him all the time for getting those phone book size things you can't hold, you can't move, you can't read comfortably, but I would buy that in a heartbeat. I loved Adventure Comics. Absolutely loved it. Never missed an issue. And this has at least one. I don't have the contents memorized, but there's at least one issue of Adventure Comics in here that's a famous one from 1955, where Superboy encounters a super dog. It's his dog. It's not just his cousin who eventually shows up on Earth. First, it's his dog that his father sent into space as a trial run, kind of a Leica thing, kind of a Sputnik kind of trial run. He puts the dog in orbit first, and not only the dog. There was also a monkey. Jor-El just sent all kinds of living things into space in rockets. But it's actually this. There it is. There is Superboy encountering Krypto the Superdog, and that issue is in here. And Supergirl and Krypto the Superdog are genuine examples of Superman encountering fellow survivors of the planet Krypton. In other words, as these issues go on, Superman's mythos is broadened. Depending on how much you want to revisit these things, you get the Legion of Superheroes, you get Supergirl, you get a more fleshed out version of who exactly the criminals are in the Phantom Zone. You get a lot more Kryptonian history of the past. Before the planet exploded, Superman, many an issue during this formative decade, is something jogging Superman's memory or telling us some story from vanished Krypton. And they're just lavish with invention. Just lavish with them. But in addition to all of that Kryptonian stuff, the Superman issues in this volume take a page from Adventure Comics with Superboy by constantly feinting at more Kryptonian stuff that turns out not to be true. The secret sauce here for these Superman stories, in addition to him figuring out what the latest crime syndicate is doing, and occasionally fencing with Lex Luthor. In addition to that, there's a pattern that was carried over from Adventure Comics with Superboy. When you were reading Superboy's adventures, he's having all sorts of adventures, and there are schemes that are being conducted by fiendish interlopers or fiendish crime syndicates. But a lot of every issue of Superboy at least had one story in which someone with superpowers shows up in Smallville and causes all sorts of mischief, or gives Superboy a run for his money for a little while, or poses a serious challenge to him. The editors at this time pretty much thought, with a couple of notable exceptions, they pretty much thought you either don't have Superman-level superpowers, or you do. That if you're an alien and you come to Earth, you will probably have Superman-level superpowers, or you won't have any at all. The notable exception that's captured in this volume is a great story where we meet a character who thinks that he's Superman's brother. He comes to Earth and he's clearly not human. He's much tougher than a human, much faster and stronger than a human. But it quickly becomes apparent to Superman anyway that this guy isn't his brother, and isn't anywhere near as powerful as he thinks he is. And when the origin story is given, it turns out, yes, it's not Superman's brother. It's instead a guy from another planet in Krypton's solar system. A smaller planet, a planet with a far lower gravity index, so that the guy is stronger and tougher than a normal human being, but nowhere near Kryptonian level. Well, you think about when you reflexively think about Krypton exploding. Are you thinking that there were other inhabited technological planets in the solar system when that happened? It never crossed my mind until that issue. And it's rather touching. The character goes home at the end, but we can easily see him again. There are still, in other words, people on planets in Krypton's solar system that just saw this thing explode in the night sky, which raises all sorts of questions. An impertinent little snot from small town Iowa may or may not have typed out a letter, hunting and pecking, and sent in a question to Superman Comics saying, well, if there's another planet in Krypton's solar system that has technology, why would Jor-El send his son all the way to a mysterious planet called Earth? Why wouldn't he send it? Why a spaceship journey that Kal-El might not even survive, that takes who knows how long, as opposed to sending him, on a 15-hour journey in a parabola to the next inhabited planet in your solar system? Why would you do that? Obviously, that kind of why was not asked. But I don't think we ever see that character again. And there are a few other characters here that we don't see, like, for instance, Super Kid, who is Jimmy Olsen. Puts on a Superman costume, and for the whole course of an issue, the whole course of an adventure, he's under the impression that he has superpowers. Superman knows that he doesn't, and is constantly foiled from proving it to him. He's constantly trying to prove to Jimmy, look, you don't have X-ray vision. This is the explanation. And then something happens that ruins the proof. You don't have super strength. My favorite example, he says to Jimmy Olsen, well, if you're superpowered, you should be able to fly. If you're my little brother. Jimmy Olsen is having a mental aberration and thinks he's Superman's little brother from Krypton. And Superman says, well, he should be able to fly. And Jimmy Olsen says, sure, I can. And the next thing we see, he's far up in the air grabbing the branch of a tree over the sidewalk. And the reason why, we're told, is because he epically slipped on a banana peel. He didn't fly. He just epically slipped. So banana peels are sort of the comic book shorthand for being slippery. They aren't all that slippery. If you step on a banana peel, you're unlikely to slip and lose your footing. You're certainly not going to fly 30 feet into the air. But the writer thought, well, why not? Why not this be extra slippery so that he thinks he's flying? Like you wouldn't know if you slipped uncontrollably versus flew under your own power. But he's grabbing onto the tree branch, and Superman is thinking, oh, well, I hate to burst his bubble, but I'll prove it to him. Then a dog comes along and eats the banana peel, so he can't prove it to him. And eventually, Superman, it's a weird thing. Eventually, Superman thinks, well, I need to figure out what to do here, and I need to keep Jimmy under wraps until I do. He's here in my apartment building in a Superman costume, a skin-tight Superman costume, calling himself my little brother. So what I'll do is I'll knock him out and tie him up on the couch with rope that I just happen to have lying around. And when he wakes up and realizes that he can't break free, he'll know that he's not superpowered. But he gets back, and Jimmy has broken free. No idea if Clark positioned a camera to catch it all for later enjoyment. But no, the thing that brings him out is that eventually Clark says, well, if you're going to be from Krypton and you're going to be like me, you need a secret identity. How about the secret identity of Jimmy Olsen, who works at the Daily Planet? And Jimmy Olsen thinks, okay, sounds great to me. And so he's working at the Daily Planet when suddenly he shows up to the planet in his Superman costume, and Lois Lane says, Jimmy, what are you doing in that Superman costume? And suddenly Jimmy Olsen wakes up from his trauma. It's a whole Freudian field day. But in addition to that, and in addition to Superman's brother, who's not Superman's brother, there's also Superman Jr., a kid who has Superman-like powers, only in the gimmick of that story, every time he uses one of his powers, he takes it away from Superman, who has to figure out how to be effective against a criminal when suddenly he doesn't have his super strength, or suddenly he's not invulnerable. The writers of this period always partitioned off Superman's powers. They were never an organic unit. It was always that he had invulnerability, but it didn't have anything to do with his strength. He had speed, but that didn't have anything to do with his eyesight. And he could lose one of those abilities and not lose all the others. Doesn't make any sense at all, but they got a lot of mileage out of that. And let me see if I can find the, yeah, Kurt Swan. It was Wayne Boring who did a lot of the interior artwork here, and that's a little bit on the unfortunate side because Wayne Boring has a fairly stiff. I mean, look at that. That's Superman changing position in flight. There he is changing, flying through the air. There he is flashing through the air, being thrown by a tree branch. And those are the exact same thing. They're all three the exact same thing. So it gets a little static to look at Wayne Boring's artwork. But the Kurt Swan cover is great. There is Superman having a picnic with Superman Jr. Notice Superman Jr.'s costume is different. It's intriguingly different. He has the sort of a quasi-military look there with rank insignia on his shirt and a different kind of Superman symbol, one with Junior in the middle there. And they're cooling off the lemonade and cooking up the hot dogs. They've got a tent ready for two. It's a fantastic story, and I went back to it myself for it's actually a thing that I've been slowly piecemeal working on, lovingly slowly working on a gigantic story about the Legion of Superheroes. Only not the Legion of Superheroes the way it ever was in Adventure Comics, but rather a different kind, my own version, my own vision of the Legion of Superheroes, in which I say that they wouldn't just go back in time for Superboy, right? In the Legion of Superheroes mythos, they're a super team of teenagers 1,000 years in the future, and they go back in time to recruit Superboy to their team using a time machine. And my own conception of the Legion is that in addition to all of the personalities that I've loved writing while I've been picking away at this story, in addition to that, of course, if you are an interplanetary adventure society or a peacekeeping society or a crime-fighting society, you would want as many A-list heavy hitters as you possibly could get, right? Perfectly good for Legion stories and lots of intrigue to have Triplicate Girl or Shrinking Violet, but you want as many A-listers as you can get. And to hell with the Legion rule that says you can't duplicate powers. If you can make an exception for Superboy and Supergirl, you can make an exception for 10 people who have that kind of power level, right? You want 10 people with that kind of power level, or 20. And in my Legion story, they even have an informal classification of their own. The Legion thinks of them as the heavy guns and parcels them out accordingly. So if there's a major piece of trouble in some solar system, well, you might send Timberwolf or Chameleon Boy or Bouncing Boy, but you'll send a big gun too. You'll be sure to do that. You'll be sure to send somebody who can tear a planet apart with their bare hands. No mission that has any chance of being physical will happen without one of them. And if you really want to make an impression on the Kuns or whoever, you'll send a bunch of your A-listers who can outmaster any space fleet ever put into service. I thought my Legion would certainly do that, and that would just bring more personality. They would still go hunting through time for adventurers who were not A-list superpowers. In the very first adventure of the Legion of Superheroes, we see a statue to a superhero from Mars who has a ray gun and a helmet and all. I came up with the whole backstory. They go and get that guy. Doesn't have any natural-born superpowers, but he is a legendary figure. So they go and get him. Never mind the statue that was commemorated to him. They go and get him to be a member of the Legion. And the same thing is true with all of the heavy hitters. Yes, they have Superboy, and yes, they have Supergirl. But they also have Andromeda, who was a Supergirl stand-in in Keith Giffen's 5 years later saga. Figure, why not? Get her too. Also in an early Adventure Comics Adventure of the Legion. Or no, it was a Supergirl story, I think, where Superman meets a woman from a planet with a green sun or something like that. She has Superman-level powers. And then the minute he brings her to Earth to be his wife, because they have matching superpowers, so of course that's going to work, she doesn't have any superpowers because she doesn't have them under a yellow sun. I thought, if Brainiac 5 can fix the Daxamite allergy to lead, he can fix that too. And then you've got another character, a silver-haired woman who has Superman-level powers, and so on down the line. I made sure to fill the roster with those people. And one of them was Superboy Jr., who only appears in that one story. We never see him again. But I loved it. I absolutely loved that story. So I just shard it off into a reality of my own. I say that the radiation that at first caused him to siphon powers away from Superman eventually leveled up. Not siphoning powers anymore at all. It was just a temporary thing. And So he has Superman level powers. And he is a member of the Legion, and he has an even more exaggerated military costume. And I also make him a bit of a prickly prima donna. He calls himself Superman. That's his name. Superman isn't around in the 30th century. He doesn't call himself Superman Jr., he calls himself Superman, and he expects everybody else to call him Superman too. And the Legion does, they humor him, but when he's not around, they call him Junior. Not even Superman Jr., they just call him Junior. But if they need to send in a big gun, he is one of 6 or 7 big guns, rather than the current Legion idea where, well, there is no current Legion idea at the moment, but the standard Legion idea was that if you needed to send in a big gun, you had basically 3. You had Mon-El, you had Superboy, and you had Ultra Boy, who can only use one superpower at a time, but when he uses his super strength, it's Superboy level super strength. That always struck me as just insufficient. So I went and filled out the Legion's ranks, and I went to these old issues of Superman and old issues of Adventure Comics, any character that showed up in Smallville or Metropolis with superpowers. I was careful to sift through and see, can I shard off their story and use it? And also lots of characters that didn't have superpowers. But anyway, getting back to this, I just want to say I got a lot of use out of Superman Jr. I got a lot. There's one scene that I just loved writing, where the Legionnaires who are on a mission with Superboy Jr. have to constantly stop themselves from referring to him as Junior when he can hear them. But anyway, this anthology is terrific because it has all of that stuff. It has the first meeting of Superman and Supergirl. It has the first meeting of Lois Lane and Lana Lang. Lana Lang is brought into the Superman continuity from the Adventures of Superboy. She's Superboy's Smallville crush, his sweetheart, his high school sweetheart. And it automatically creates a fascinating tension between her and Lois Lane. There's scarcely a dud in this anthology. It's just terrific. Usually anthologies like this, you pay the admission price that you pay for the inclusion of really good bits is a few not so good bits, but there aren't any in here. There's Titano the Super Ape and Lex Luthor and Brainiac, a whole bunch of seminal stories, but also lots and lots of great little one-shots, like Superman's brother, like Super Kid, like Superman Jr., lots of things like that just show the inventiveness of the period. An inventiveness that was doomed to become dramatic and relevant and urgent and pressing and serious and gritty in very little time. In very little time. This is the last twinkling of the sun on the rocks. The last twinkling of the Superman that I unabashedly love. This was the same period as the great TV show, The Adventures of Superman. That was totally formative for me. It's totally formative for me. So it's a little bit of foreboding when I look at a volume like this, because I think about what's coming. I think about not so much the Superman stories that happened maybe 10 years in the future of this, but 20 years, 30 years, where suddenly you have a Superman who's Clark Kent who's wearing bell-bottoms, and then you're just primed for John Byrne to come in with Man of Steel and ruin everything. Just ruin everything. That miniseries is going to crop up on Comic Book Wednesday, but the main reason that this issue fills me with foreboding is not because when I'm rereading this, it was great to reread this. Very glad that Michael picked it. But the main reason for the foreboding is that this is a great pick. This is a fantastic pick for Comic Book Wednesday. I mean, look at that. 1955. I remember it like it was yesterday, buying this issue. I remember it like it was yesterday. This is a great pick, and you might think, well, why would that fill you with foreboding? It's the reason why is because, as I mentioned, Michael is doing the picking. And it could very well be that he is trying to grease up the works because he has something horrible in mind for next week. Horrible. There are so many horrible things in his extensive comic book collection. He has, like so many misguided youths of his generation, he has a fixation with Doom Patrol, the losers team of superheroes, but a whole bunch of other things too. He even made, I scarcely know how to say it out loud, he even made what I'm hoping is an idle threat about Killraven. Oh, God. You just have to hope. There's so much good stuff out there. I have to hope that he goes easy on me next week. But in the meantime, I can certainly recommend this volume, this Superman in the 50s. DC is constantly putting out new collected volumes like this all the time. They do it all the time. A lot of times those volumes have a current year Twitter politics agenda, and so can't be trusted. A lot of times they're dumb. The way they're put together is just unimaginative. This is a fantastic volume. Just fantastic. It's a Superman volume to have. And Michael picked it out of thin air with no prompting by me. So that's our comic for this week. Superman in the 50s. Not just my favorite time of buying and reading the character, but also my favorite time of watching the character every week on TV. Anyway, it could all be downhill from here. We'll find out next week. Thank you, BookTube.